What's up, guys? Sergeant Artie right here, and today, oh, my cat is staring at me weird. But today we're going to be reacting to Eastory, a very nice YouTube channel, one of my favorite history channels. This one is going to be Germany's plans to win World War I. Yeah, and yeah. Oh, I need to react to Tick again. Very amazing channel. But maybe after I react to some of Eastory's videos. But yeah, let's get started.
To see what were the German plans to win World War I and how they changed. In early 20th century, the alliance of Germany and Austria was opposed by the alliance of Russia and France. The strength of the alliances was quite equal, so an inconclusive and bloody war was to be expected. The German army wanted none of it and looked at its potential enemies for weaknesses. It was believed that one of the weaknesses of the Entente nations was that due to its size and poor infrastructure, it would take Russia several weeks more than Germany to get its entire army to the front.
Oh yeah, and this would be wrong.
Time, Germany had to contend only with France and had an upper hand. The Germans wanted to use the first weeks of the war to inflict a blow from which their enemies would not be able to recover. The question was where to do it. They could attempt to destroy the Russian forces stationed on the border, but due to the long distances of the Eastern Front, the damage would have been limited. The distances in the west were much shorter, and it was possible to inflict more damage to the French army. For this, the Germans had to draw the French into a decisive battle. The best way to make the French to fully commit their troops was to invade France, but the French had prepared just for this occasion and had built a line of fortifications on the Franco-German border. So the Germans decided to bypass the line by moving through Belgium, then defeat the French army in a decisive battle, forcing France to make peace. Then they would move the bulk of their forces east and use the newly gained superior.
The Schlieffen was actually originally they originally wanted to also invade the Netherlands and Luxembourg as well, not just Belgium. So yeah.
Superiority to defeat Russia. The pieces were all set, and all that was needed was someone to light the fuse. On the 28th of June 1914, Austro-Hungarian Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated and declarations of war followed. Now, Germany was able to implement its plan and moved into Belgium. They managed to advance into France, but their plan as a whole proved to be too optimistic, and they failed to trap and destroy the French army, and fighting resulted in a stalemate. Also,
oh yeah, they were literally so close, and then my cat is watching me with my hands in the air. So weird, Eclipse. They were so close, and then the miracle of the Marne happens, where the British and French were able to defend, and then they pushed them back, and then trench warfare happened. Yeah, they were so close. The French actually did really horribly at the beginning, because they wore really bright colors on their uniforms and did massive attacks and stuff at the beginning. So yeah.
So Britain joined the Entente and enacted a meeting resulted in a stalemate. Also, Britain joined the Entente and enacted a maritime blockade on Germany.
This is basically why Germany lost, this blockade.
Warfare set in on the Western Front, making attacking difficult. It meant that it would be more complicated for Germany to defeat France, but at the same time made it unlikely that Britain and France could invade Germany. Meanwhile in the east, the absence of the German army had made itself felt. They managed to keep control over East Prussia, but...
Yeah, because this isn't mentioned in the video, but I think I'll mention it now. The Russians... they actually were able to mobilize a lot faster than the Germans thought. So they were able to get their troops faster than the Germans assumed. And the Russians were only stopped because of the... how did I forget the name? I forgot the name of that battle. Whatever, you know what I mean.
But Russian army had made inroads into...
I don't know how I forgot the name of that battle. What in the world? Whatever, it's fine.
Hungary, threatening to knock it out of the war and tied up many Central Powers units. In 1915, the Germans decided to go over on defensive in the west and stabilize the situation in the east to free up the troops. The Russian army had prepared for a short war, and its weak...
Isn't it kind of hilarious how Austria-Hungary can't defeat Serbia, like a tiny nation? Even though at the beginning they committed most of their troops against Serbia. It's honestly kind of ridiculous.
weapons industry could not yet adequately supply its troops. They were unable to resist the Central Powers and took a defensive stance by shortening the length of the front twofold. In this time, Bulgaria was convinced to join the Central Powers, which allowed them to defeat Serbia. This was, however, offset by the entry of Italy into the war. The Eastern Front was now secure.
People like to call Italy like a traitor or whatever to Germany and Austria-Hungary, but what are you doing, Eclipse? You're so weird. But the truth was that the Triple Alliance was a defensive pact. And yeah, it was Austria-Hungary. What? What is it? It was Austria-Hungary who declared war on Serbia, and Germany who declared war on France. So yeah, that's why. And because they had closer trade ties with like the British or whatever. And because they were promised a whole lot of land that they never even got.
Although Russia still remained in the war. In the early 1916, the situation of the Central Powers had been stabilized, but the British blockade was slowly sapping their strength, and in order not to lose the war, they had to inflict a decisive defeat on the Entente. In the east, it would be difficult for them to reach the areas vital for Russian war effort due to vast distances and poor infrastructure. Even if the Germans would be able to make substantial advances, it was hard to make Russia surrender. Operations in the east would be more difficult than in the previous year, as the Russian army had shortened its defensive lines and was beginning to overcome the supply shortages. Although the Central Powers could have been successful in Russia, they would probably find themselves committing a lot of their troops without removing Russia from the war. In the west, there was trench warfare, and German attacks needed to expend a lot of men and material resources to break through the Entente defenses. In case of German advance, the French and the British could pull back, inflicting vast casualties and winning slowly by attrition. Or they could counterattack, thus making the losses more equal but denying the Germans any territory. Neither of the options could lead to a decisive German victory. Instead, the plan was to make the Entente attack the Germans and expend their manpower on strong defenses. After they had sustained enough losses, the Germans would have the superiority needed to go on an offensive and win the war. It was not an easy task to make the Entente adopt such a suicidal strategy, so a complicated and cunning plan was devised. The Germans would attack
the Battle of Verdun.
Fortress of Verdun, where they could create a great tactical advantage for themselves, but which was symbolically vital for the French. The plan relied on three assumptions. After the initial German successes, the French will not withdraw from Verdun, but will at any cost attempt counterattacks to regain the land around it. The British and the French shall launch an attack on the German defenses in other sectors to ease the German pressure on Verdun. During these operations, the French and the British would suffer much more casualties than the Germans. The first two assumptions were correct. The French held on to Verdun, and the Entente attacked at Somme to help with the defense. But the third assumption was not. During these operations, the Entente had suffered the loss of 1 million men, but the German casualties were only slightly smaller. The Germans had made another miscalculation.
Oh yeah, I forgot the exact details why, but yeah, it was a lot harder to take Verdun than they originally thought it would.
Assumed that in 1916 the Eastern Front would be quiet. But the entry of Italy to the war in the previous year had divided the Austro-Hungarian forces, and
oh yeah, and then Romania is gonna join, and then they're gonna do an attack and
the
stuff.
measures to improve the armament of the Russian army began to kick in. The Russians carried out a successful offensive, pushing the Austro-Hungarian forces back. Soon the situation deteriorated even further, as the success of Russian attacks convinced Romania to join the war against the Central Powers, and
I wonder why Romania didn't join the Central Powers against Russia. Like, sure, there's Transylvania that obviously they would want, but from Russia they could get Moldova, which is also Romanian land. And there's like a nice little river there too. Like, I don't get it. And Russia is the one that's losing. Like, do you not see the amount of land they just lost? Just saying. Makes no sense. Why? And you have Bulgaria right there. It's dumb.
Now German reserves had to be dispatched to save the Eastern Front from collapse. The Central Powers had failed to inflict a decisive defeat on their enemies and were mostly on the defensive again, with the British blockade bringing their defeat nearer by the day. It was time to think outside the box and adopt creative and risky strategies, or war was lost. The risks associated with these strategies were huge. Germany now attempted to knock Russia and Britain out of the war. A revolution had taken place in Russia, but the new government decided to carry on with the war. German plan was to support the influence of the left-wing political parties in Russia, hoping that they would create internal strife, causing Russia to make peace. They allowed Lenin to travel back to Russia from Switzerland and allegedly gave large subsidies to his Bolshevik party. This strategy was risky, as the success of socialist...
Dang. And guys, okay, this is kind of off topic, but if you think about it, the Germans played a humongous part in the spread of communism. Not only was Karl Marx German, but also, like, the Frankfurt School, that was also communist. Like, and a lot of, like, theorizers and philosophers of communism were also German. And Germany literally let Lenin go to Russia and help subsidize his revolution. Like, the Germans played such a big part in communism. I just realized that.
In Russia could very well cause instability or even revolution in Germany itself. The other plan was to starve Britain into surrendering by using the submarine fleet to sink the British shipping. For this strategy to be effective, the Germans had to sink all the ships carrying cargoes to Britain, which included the ships from neutral countries. This carried the risk of war with these nations. Unrestricted submarine warfare had been adopted earlier, but later discontinued in the fear that America would declare war on Germany. Now the situation was deemed to be desperate enough to risk it, and unrestricted submarine warfare was reintroduced. At the same time, Germany attempted to free up troops by reducing the length of the Western Front and substituting men with weapons. Despite these efforts, during 1917, they couldn't spare troops for more than maintaining the current state, which would ultimately result in defeat. Entente offensives in the west were repelled and sizable forces were dispatched to Romania in order to seize its resources. Italian army was pushed back in order to keep Austria-Hungary in the war. It was all on the out-of-the-box measures by this time. The strategy directed against Britain failed totally, as the adoption of convoy system reduced the efficiency of the German submarines and the United States did enter the war against Germany. Russia,
yeah, but that wasn't really because of the submarine warfare.
However, was another case. Russian army was weakened by the revolution, which allowed the Central Powers to advance and improve their positions. The Bolsheviks managed to increase their influence in Russia and deposed the government. They had to demobilize most of the army, but refused to make peace with Germany and attempted to incite
Why?
The Germans managed to keep the situation under control. In order to resolve the situation in the east, the Germans went on an offensive. The Russian army had lost its fighting capabilities, and the German advance took over large parts of the former Russian Empire, forcing the Bolsheviks to agree to their terms. By this time, the resource stocks had become critical, and it seemed that unless the situation improved, defeat was only a question of time. Despite that, a window of opportunity had been created. The freed up troops from the east gave the Germans the numbers needed to have a chance to launch an offensive in the west.
Oh yeah, these were the... Oh, these are called. But yeah, these are the Kaiserschlacht or something? I don't know.
Now, both the Entente and the Germans had developed better ways to break through the enemy's trenches, and it was possible to undertake a decisive offensive. However, there was a catch. The Germans needed to defeat the Entente before the newly arriving American troops would make the odds overwhelming. They launched an all-out offensive. The attacks took large amounts of territory, but caused many casualties to the Germans. In the end, the line held, and the Germans were unable to deliver a decisive blow. It became clear that Germany was unable to win, and the Entente armies launched a counter-offensive.
That's not good.
The Germans attempted to hold on to captured lands in order to secure a better peace settlement, but their army was spent and began to fall back towards the German border. As all was lost, Germany finally agreed to surrender. So, was Germany doomed from the start? Can you think of strategies which could have ended the war in a German victory? Share these ideas in the comments. The German war effort might have been strangled by the blockade, but not this channel. And I have my Patreons to thank for it. If you'd like to join this club of blockade runners, you can do that through Patreon.
Well, thank you all for watching, everyone. And yeah, stay tuned for my next videos. Subscribe, do all that stuff. And wait. I'm not subscribed to them? That's weird. Okay, but anyways, yeah, subscribe to Eastory and watch their videos. And ow! What the heck, dude? Why are you biting me? What did I ever do to you? Okay, whatever, guys. Goodbye. Well, everyone, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like it and subscribe to my channel. And, you know, turn on the notification bell thingy. And if you didn't, then make sure to leave a thumbs down. But yeah, that would be greatly appreciated. And while you're at it, go ahead and watch my other videos. They're probably just as good, and if not better than this one right now. Except for my oldest videos, don't watch those. And, you know, subscribe to these people down here, my fellow sergeants. They're other YouTubers that I either know or I have in high regards. Yeah, even my cat agrees. So, thank you for watching, and have a great day.